Welcome back, everyone. As you can see from where we're standing, we are back at the Oliver School construction site. We are working on program number 2, and today we have a special treat. We have Alex Pitkin, one of the architects from SMMA. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here on this beautiful sunny afternoon.
Yes, we're lucky with that. We don't even really need the coats. It's a beautiful day. Can you explain, how did you go about deciding what could stay, what needed to be removed?
The Oliver School is situated on Campagnon Commons, which is a historic district here in the city, with the City Hall across the way. That historic district runs about halfway across the site to Oak Street. This is one of the few buildings in this part of the city that runs the full block. The library at the end of the block is also all the way across from Campagnon to the O'Neill Playground or Parks on the other side. So it really gave us this opportunity to connect across the two major green spaces here in downtown. That informed our conversations with some of the historic district folks about where we should be concerned about saving the building. So if you stand back in Campagnon Commons, you really will perceive the historic building as being in its entirety, even though we took down the back half. You'll see the new building is sort of more of a backdrop. Not that we want it to feel like a separate building. As a matter of fact, internally it was a real opportunity to create a cohesive whole for the school. The older building was sort of lacking that. One thing to notice with the historic building is it's what's called a mass masonry wall. So these walls are 12, 14 inches thick, solid through, with granite or brick backing them all the way up. So they're very inflexible, generally speaking. So they tend to have smaller windows. The corridors were kind of narrow, not what we would expect to see in a modern educational environment. But they do serve certain aspects. Our kindergarten, our preschool spaces, first grade classrooms, those are actually really well served by the kinds of spaces that remain in this smaller portion of the building.
Even just right behind us, there used to be a number of stairs that you'd have to go up to get into the building, and in the future it'll just be right on the one level straight in.
And yet still trying to save some of the integrity of how that looked. We wanted that portal to feel like a window looking out onto the space. We're going to have some sitting areas. This is a very tight site. We built on virtually every square foot that we had available to us. So these outdoor spaces are things that we're doing in schools today, which are really important. Get the kids outside. There are spaces where children and their teachers can congregate on a day like today to get out, get a little bit of fresh air, kind of open their minds a little bit more and make it a more enjoyable education experience.
So many things to talk about, but let's start looking at maybe some of the things that were preserved or have been recreated.
The building was built in 1912, so there are many patches over that intervening 100-plus years. Obviously, all the windows are new and they're triple glazed, so they're really modern window, and yet they look like a historic type of window. And then some of the stone was cracked, so some of those were either taken down and replaced or just patched in place with some modern rehabilitation and restoration materials.
See some light fixtures that are new from when we were here last.
There were lights all around the existing building, and they were all broken, every single one of them. But the cast iron fixture itself was very nice, and it had a perfect fit to the old masonry that they're attached to. So we asked them to be all taken down, salvaged, and they found the best pieces from each of them and basically rehabilitated those fixtures, and they're just being installed now.
You can really see the thought that has gone into the process of what can be preserved. And I believe this is original granite, and then some granite was also salvaged. Is that correct?
Yeah, so all around the building, the granite was as high as you see here in the front. The entire first floor was actually this granite plinth or base course. Beautiful stone material. We didn't have enough of that to use that same tall first floor, but we had enough that we could recreate a very challenging puzzle to create, but to have that only the first 2 feet or so around the building. We call these modern buildings. They still have to survive our New England winters, you know, kids who kicking balls against the building. So there's nothing better than granite, and that's going to, again, serve the building well for the next 100 years.
We're not going to spoil any of Steve's fun facts, but we're standing right now. Has anybody here watching heard of Cardillo Way? Because we are standing on it, correct?
That's correct. Not necessarily something that was described as a really important part of the planning of the site, but we did notice early on that this was a walking point that really connects the north side of the city with the Campagnon Commons. And you can see that it's directly connected to the passage through Campagnon Commons. We realized that if we sealed this off with the building and we didn't allow the public and the neighborhood to cross through here, you're going to have to circumnavigate the entire block, which is a long block. We realized that this would be an important urban connection point through here. This will be all nicely landscaped, pavers throughout, and it'll be a lot cleaner than it sort of had an alley-like feel to it. So hopefully this will make a nice little connection between the north side of the site and the south side of the site.
That's a really thoughtful detail as well, because it's a very walkable city. A lot of people are walking, moving around, and it is very big block, especially with a very big school now taking up much more of a center stage. And now we know it's Cardillo Way.
Cardillo Way.
We're talking about Cardillo Way, and you can see if you're looking this way, there is that pathway, that tunnel. I don't know if it has an official architectural term.
I guess you could call it passageway or portal, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you also notice now this is more of the older style, the older windows you were mentioning, the older brick, and then it transitions into a different color and a little bit more modern feel. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, this is a pretty good vantage point to see all the materials. One of the few places probably on site where this you'll be able to sort of pick up on everything that happened in the design. So we talked about the historic brick and these walls that are really thick and that mass masonry, and then all of a sudden you see this brick that matches it. It's not the exact same brick. We went to about 3 or 4 different manufacturers and we found the closest brick that we could find. And then if you look closely, you can see that we did match the way the brick is laid out. But that brick is a veneer brick. It's only 4 inches thick above that granite base. And we did that on this 4-story stair tower component on both sides of the building, just to kind of bring a sort of a transition element to the more modern building behind. And then when we got to the back, we did want to transition the materials to something a little more modern. Again, it's that veneer, so you can see we don't have as much depth to play with, so you see things that start to look a little bit different with the brick patterning. And because of the building, you can see here in this winter light, it's heavily in shadow. So we wanted to use a lighter brick color to make it a little bit more uplifting and to separate itself from the historic building.
Attention to detail is amazing.
At every window head, you can see that there's a line across, and so the brick is gravity is sitting on top of a steel member that runs across. But otherwise, everything is basically attached to the steel structure behind, like a curtain, basically hung against the structure behind. You can see with the more modern expression of the material, we're also allowed to have larger windows. So this section right above the portal, if you will, that's called curtain wall. And that gave us a lot of glass. Those are some of the sort of public areas and some of the corridors for each of the grade levels as they go up. And you can see some of the windows get a little bit bigger over here on the classroom wings as well.
And you were mentioning earlier how the original masonry was so much thicker. That helped for the stability of the structure versus using modern I-beams and steel? Is that also a difference?
That's exactly right. So there was a limit to how tall you could build a building like that. Maybe about 4 or 5 stories, otherwise it would get uncomfortably too thick. Many buildings around the city would have that very thick wall construction would be built up. Not great for earthquakes and that kind of modern consideration. That's why we build with steel today. The structure's a lot more flexible and much more survivable. When you take on a very large project like this, you don't just ignore the existing building. You have to bring that up to all modern requirements as well.
We've just walked from the front of the building, Cardillo Way, and now we're on the Oak Street side. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing in this area?
We've come to the other front entrance of the building here on Oak Street. This was a great opportunity, to alleviate some of the traffic and pressure on the other side of the building on Haverhill Street. We also had a little bit more space to play with to make it a little bit more conducive for drop-off and pickup on this side of the building. And Cardillo Way, this was also sort of the service area for the old building. The old building had sort of zero space for things like dumpsters and items like that. So what you'll notice with this design is we actually put all the dumpsters and compactors inside the building. I think that's sort of a nice gesture for the neighborhood. And when we walked through Cardillo Way, we were actually walking over the top of the kitchen, which is underneath. So we took advantage of, as I say, every square foot on the site. Now we're getting into the conversation about the terracotta and the material that was chosen for the north side. So this side of the building is always going to be in shadow, except for very early in the morning. And so terracotta is a lot like a brick material. So it's an ancient material, probably pre-Roman. And so this is not something new and fancy, but it looks very modern. And it has been updated for modern use in what's called, again, that curtain wall. So it's these overhangs, basically because we were always in shadow, we took the columns out from this walkway. So we're always in shadow. We're protected from the rain to get to this main entrance, but this feels a lot lighter because those columns have been removed. The terracotta is a lighter color and more uplifting, and that's just basically hung off the steel, which is this major cantilever that comes from the inside of the building. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic kind of change for the architecture on this side of the building. What used to be rows of houses along Oak Street on both sides, and then when the playground was built, all those houses ended up going away. So the school really kind of fills in and creates this urban edge.
And then I see I'm looking at lighting. Is that what those long rectangles are above us?
Yeah, again, the clocks have changed and it'll be dark here soon. So when school is in session, lighting becomes very important. We wanted to make sure that this was well lit, that people don't feel like they're going through a tunnel here when they go into Cardillo Way, so there's plenty of lighting in there.
We have a different color behind us, so what are we looking at here?
With the terracotta lifted up above us, we introduced some metal panel as a way of lightening the facade up yet again on this northern side. You can see that the windows get even larger here on this north side. We have no direct daylight, so we want to pull as much daylight into some of these classroom spaces. These are actually an art room up above us here. Nice northern light, and some of the administration spaces below us. And then you can see that the metal panel will kind of weave its way across the entire bottom of the north facade, leading us to this secondary main entrance on the Oak Street front. We talked about these dancing windows, the color, but we also, if you see that they have different sill heights and sometimes different head heights. Again, just a little bit more playful. It's kind of a serious looking building in some ways, but we tried to take some opportunity to add a little bit of variety and texture through these different materials and the way the fenestration and the windows and doors were actually placed.
And we did see some colored windows in the gym area last time. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for those?
It was, again, how could we address these long vistas that people will have of the building? So on the Campagnon side, people will be walking from City Hall and they'll see the historic expression. On this side, well, we wanted to ask ourselves, what could we do if people are playing in the O'Neill playgrounds, they're walking up to the site. That was one opportunity, especially in the winter months when the inside lights are on, to bring some color both inside to out. Did want it to have an impact for the neighborhood.
We are right near one of the entranceways, and Steve is joining us, if you'll recognize him from show number 1. Steve, get some fun facts ready for us.
New fun fact for today. This time I'll throw at everyone the number of different workers on site. As of right now, there's been over 1,000 different workers on site playing a small part in this project.
We're going to take a walk inside and see what else is new. I almost feel like I need my sunglasses inside because there's some beautiful new lighting. We're up on the 3rd floor, the yellow theme. Please tell us what else is new.
Big milestone this month in November. Last week we received the permanent power for the buildings. Power is now hooked up and wired to power pole right outside the building. Great to see the permanent lighting in here and really show off how beautiful all the classrooms are. Several fixtures hanging above the ceiling, and then also in other areas like the countertop space, there's some under cabinet lighting as well.
Fascinating to see the progress just from one month to the next. It's really beautiful. And you had mentioned, I see, there was something a little bit different. We just walked through into a classroom last time. So you said glazing. Is that a new term for us?
Yeah, so the interior glazing installation started over the last few weeks. Interior frames, some of them have what we call side lights, which is the glass next to the doorway, or transoms, which is the glass above the doorway. So in some of the classrooms throughout the upper floors, they have corner frames like we see over here, which provides a lot of natural daylight into the classroom.
We passed this on our first show, and there was a lot of piping and things, and we talked about a sink, but this is a really cool sink.
New shared sinks in between the boys and girls group bathrooms.
It's called a solid surface material. Maybe you've heard of Corian as one of the sort of brand names that you might hear about. So yeah, these are all kind of pre-molded. So now you can fit more kids in here at one time. The reason why it's on the outside, post-COVID, kids can keep their hands clean even when they're not going into the bathroom.
We're still on level 3, but it looks completely different. We're right at that transition spot.
Level 3 existing building corridor flows right into the new building, which is right here at this transition. And at all of those transitions between the existing to new building, like we talked about in the last video, that's where the building expansion joint will be located to allow the existing building and new building to move an intentional joint between those buildings. We are just about complete with the framing. The next step is to do the sheetrock or drywall installation. The existing masonry walls are starting to get covered with that drywall. All that existing masonry will be hidden, and it'll be covered by the new drywall and new paint and new finishes. When it's all said and done, you really won't be able to tell if you're in the new or existing building.
We've moved a little bit farther down. Why is this a smaller space?
The small room used to actually be one of the 2 stairwells in the old building. We took the stair out, built new concrete floors in here, and this becomes a very useful space in modern education. So we got our big classrooms on either side of it, but these can become push-in, pull-out types of spaces where students can have, specialists can come in. We took advantage of every square foot.
So right now we're in the auxiliary gym, which is a secondary gym in the lower level.
It's really neat to be in here right now.
To our left here is the future stage location. Not an elevated stage like before, but still a stage area for performances. And surrounding the stage on either side there will be millwork pillars, just like there was before, and some other historic millwork and trim along the top to make it feel like it never moved or never changed other than the new materials. And then one of the coolest parts about the auxiliary gym, above the stage, the mural that was salvaged over 2.5 years ago, that's currently going through a restoration process, and that mural will be reinstalled at the end of the project. On either side of the stage are 10 medallions. Those were replica castings of historical figures. We made molds of each of those figures to create basically a cast for them, and we did that process again to create the permanent medallion for the building. So that's what's been installed right behind us here. Those will eventually be painted and be part of one of the historical aspects of the project.
So will they be a future fun fact if we can all figure out who we're looking at over there?
Yeah, definitely. If anyone is viewing the video, if they want to try to guess each person in each of the medallions, we would love to know.
We have some arches and some openings. I'm assuming maybe windows going in on the sides here?
Yeah, so throughout the auxiliary gym on the north and south sides, on this floor, but also on the 3rd floor above, there'll be several different windows looking in from the adjacent corridors. Lots of natural light coming in from the south elevation and just areas to view what's going on within the auxiliary gym. And then surrounding all of those hollow metal frames and surrounding the glazing will be other new millwork trim, but matching the historic profiles that was in here before.
There's so many details that have gone into this project that we're finding out about today. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. This is a really cool space and a lot of history here from the existing building. So it's cool to see it get put back together in a way and still have the new elements of the new building.
We have learned a whole lot more today, and I thank you both. Alex, it was a pleasure having a tour with you and learning some of those really cool details about the actual original design.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I look forward to seeing Consigli's continued great work, and we'll see the interior and maybe talk a little bit more about that in the coming months.
Sounds great. Steve, again, we got some interesting facts. We have a puzzle with those medallions. Thank you both again. Appreciate it. We're enjoying the tour, and keep staying tuned. We'll bring more updates on the Oliver construction project.